Theology has often been seen as universal, something timeless, unchanging, and applicable to everyone everywhere. But what if I told you that theology is shaped by where and when you live? What if the biggest theological questions, like who is Jesus? What is salvation? What does it mean to be faithful? What if these questions are not answered the same way in every culture, but are constantly being shaped by history, society, and human experience? This is where contextual theology comes in. However, contextual theology isn't just about adapting Christianity to different cultures. It raises even bigger questions. It raises questions like, if all theology is shaped by context, does that mean there's no universal Christian truth? To answer this, we turn to two of the most influential thinkers, Robert Schreiter and Stephen Bevans. So let's break this down. In the 1980s, Catholic theologian Robert Schreiter published a book called Constructing Local Theologies. His argument was that theology is not something handed down to above, fully formed and universal. Instead, theology emerges locally. It's constructed through a dialogue between the Christian tradition and the lived experiences of a specific community. So let's put this into perspective. Imagine you're a Christian in Latin America where economic inequality and political oppression are daily realities. Your theological concerns won't just be about heaven and hell, you'll also be asking, what does the Bible say about justice? How does Jesus' message apply to the poor and the marginalized? But imagine you're a Christian in rural China where underground churches are under surveillance. Your theology is going to center on something different, potentially. You're going to be asking questions as, what does faithfulness look like under persecution? How can we live as Christians in worship when community worship is restricted? You see, Schreiter's big realization was this. It was a single universal theology ignores that Christianity is lived differently in different contexts. Theology is always shaped by questions people ask in their specific time and place. And for decades, Western theologians assumed that theology should be adapted to fit different cultures. But Schreiter flipped this question. He said, what if theology doesn't just adapt to a culture? What if theology is being created within that culture? Now, this radical idea that theology is not simply applied but emerges from human experiences sets up an even bigger question. If theology is always shaped by its context, how could we ever say that there is a core Christian message? Now, Robert Schreiter had his own way around this, but I'd like to now turn to Stephen Bevans because he's a second big name when we look at contextual theology. Bevans' claim that all theology is contextual is quite evident. That's right, all theology. Even the theology we consider universals, the doctrines, the beliefs that are passed down through the centuries, Bevans argues that they was all shaped by specific historical and cultural conditions. So all theology, according to Bevans, is contextual. Now think about the early church. They had theological debates about the nature of Christ. They weren't just abstract debates. They were shaped by Roman philosophy, Roman law, and Jewish tradition. You see, there's all that contextual elements coming in there to the establishment of this Christian doctrine, this creed. The Nicene Creed as well, so foundational to our faith, didn't emerge in a vacuum. It was developed to address political and theological conflicts of the 4th century. Or consider the Reformation. It wasn't just a return to biblical truth. It was influenced by Renaissance humanism, the printing press, and European political tensions. And that biblical truth that we're seeking to return to was in itself contextual. And even today, theological ideas continue to evolve based on modern challenges: gender, justice, mental health, and globalization. But like we said, here's where things get complicated. If all theology is contextual, does that mean there's no universal Christian message? At first glance, what we're speaking about sounds like theological relativism, that there's no authentic Christianity, just different interpretations. But theology cannot be purely relative. If theology were only shaped by culture and authority without grounding, then the Christian faith would lose all coherence. But Stephen Bevans, he helps us resolve that issue. He suggests that contextual theology is the place where two realities meet. That's the contextual past of scripture, history, and the church tradition. This is in continuity with the Christian's foundation of faith, as meets the contextual present. That's human experience, culture, politics, social struggles. This is reality that theology must engage with if it's to remain meaningful. Well, Bevan says that contextual theology happens in the tension between these two, between historical faith of the church and the ever-changing realities of human life. That's where the contextual theology happens. So this means that contextual theology is a process of negotiation and meaning making that is always in conversation with the tradition and human experiences in particular contexts. As such, Bevans provides a mediating position that resides both in rigid absolutism and theological relativism. He's saying that contextual theology is not about making theology whatever we want it to be. Instead, contextual theology recognizes that theology is constantly in dialogue. It must stay rooted in the past while engaging with the present. So rather than theology being either absolute or unchanging or completely subjective, contextual theology challenges us to think differently. So what do you think? Drop a comment below. I look forward to hearing from you.